Hi, Nadine. I'm very excited to interview you. Thank you for agreeing to be part of my podcast. And very excited to also reconnect after so long.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. And thanks for reaching out. It was so great to hear from you and then, yeah, to reconnect and be here. I feel honored. Thank you.
Nadine, I was looking at your profile and you're a Spanish major, right?
Hispanic, it's Hispanic Spanish cultures. I laugh because at this point my Spanish is not very good, and I would be embarrassed to speak any Spanish in public, especially being recorded. So putting that out there. But yes, I studied a little bit of everything, I would say, in undergrad. And at the end, somehow, I think by having studied abroad and I took a bunch of classes, culture classes, anthropological classes, and some Spanish classes. And so at the end, I had that major.
Right. And and then you worked for in the legal space, right? And
For
and
a
then
bit.
then a jump to architecture, right?
Yeah,
How
yeah,
was that time in your career?
yeah. I love that you mentioned those pieces because they do feel like very far apart. Um, yeah, I think for a while until I really found my place in, quote unquote design. I got my master's in industrial design, which I ended up not practicing, but instead I found the space that I was really interested in where all of my interests kind of came together. In that I was always interested in people, especially people from different cultures, backgrounds, the different perspectives they bring, and then kind of how, just like exciting conversations when you have people from many different contexts, whether it's different countries or just experiences, come together and just kind of talk about like their worldview and all of those things. So that's a huge component, really like, understanding people better and being kind of amongst those conversations. Yeah, and then also, one, I love organizing in all kinds of ways. So whether it's information, I can really nerd out information architecture, or my desk or whatever it is, within my space, like the tactile part is very important to me. Just having, a space that I enjoy. And I think that kind of that extends to lived environments, cities, whatever it might be, whatever scale you're thinking about. Um, and yeah, and also just thinking about, how can we not just make more stuff, but just make things a little better, work better for people. That comes out of my own desire to be able, especially, if you think about public services, you're able to actually like go on a website and it's not just a decent experience, but ideally even a delightful experience. Colorado, actually, where I'm located, Denver, Colorado, in the US, they do a pretty good job at that. So, whatever service you're trying to accomplish, at the end, you actually feel pretty good about it, rather than a lot of experiences where you're just frustrated at the end and maybe you didn't even achieve your goal. So I'm saying all those things because again, until I got into Catapult Design, where it really made sense that all of those pieces started to come together. Um, I really just kind of like went with what felt right. And I think I've always just followed my intuition because I do rely on that. I think we all do, but I very much trust in that will take me to an interesting place that aligns with who I am and what I want to do. In my different life stages, of course, we grow in many different ways over time. But yeah, I after undergrad, I was really interested in international development, doing something within that space. Ended up moving to Washington, D.C. And the job that you mentioned was at the Pan American Health Organization. So that was part of the world, or is part of the World Health Organization. And yeah, just by chance, I found myself in the legal department, which was fascinating. And I got to read a lot of really interesting agreements and just like the work, like about the work that they were doing. And through that too, through that experience, I actually like had an aha moment, or just, kind of just by being there, realizing like I was really missing the creative part. And of course, legal department, is a certain way by design. But even the rest of the organization, like I was just like, where's the like, I don't know. I didn't know what that was, but there was something missing for me. And, to me, it was like the creative. So in my head, creative meant architecture. Because at the time, and it's interesting to think back, I just, I couldn't think outside of like, okay, if I want to do something creative, it has to be architecture or interior design or like something of that nature. And so I went to Germany for half a year, did an internship in architecture. So I'm originally from Germany. So my mom and stepdad lived there. So, it wasn't as crazy maybe to think about me going there for a little bit. And then I came back and I did an internship in landscape architecture because that was, the other thing. I was like, oh, that could be interesting. And then, I'll pause there in a moment. And then the next step was I was looking at architecture programs and landscape architecture programs. And I was looking at Pratt Institute in New York, and I came across this thing called industrial design. And it kind of opened, another world to me because I was like, oh, that's right. Like people, design all these things. And it doesn't have to be a building.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's kind of where how I find my way there.
very interesting. Anything from those early years which you feel that even now, something that you picked up that you still hold close to you today?
Early days, you mean like
Eh,
undergrad
yeah,
or
no,
grad?
the legal work and then the
Hmm.
architecture. Was there something that you learned that still today you feel like, wow, okay, that was, even though it might look like opposite directions and very different from what you're doing today, but that helped you a lot.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I think, I mean, all of those pieces, like I was kind of indicating a little bit, I think kind of came together at Catapult through, which we met Catapult Design. I think we established 2018 around that time. We did some work together, and yeah, that organization, which still exists today, they they really, especially in their earlier days, were really, I would say, at the intersection of international development, global health, kind of adjacent areas, and design. So human-centered design is really the language we use, which people may or may not be familiar with. But basically, thinking about how can we center people in the design, which should be obvious, but unfortunately is not. Often business, principles or objectives and policy, depending on where you are, what space you're operating in, making lots of money, often actually takes priority. So human-centered design, again, really like thinking about the people, research and all those components being part of that, integral to that process. And yeah, I think for example, working at the Pan American Health Organization, while I don't necessarily work there now, I think again at Catapult, there were very adjacent kind of areas in global health that I worked in. Um, and even now that I'm working in public sector, like it's still the same kind of domain in a sense, right? Even though we are more focused on the US, at least for now. We're very open to also expanding. Yeah, it really is about, how can we create services, programs, all of those things to work better for people. And yeah, I think same with, architecture. While I'm not designing buildings, I'm designing and, helping design experiences for people. And so it really is about, again, really understanding like how do people, what are their experiences? Try to understand, try to like really, identify those opportunities to make things better, to improve things based on the real evidence and data. And so, yeah, I think, I mean, to me, everything is connected, right? I mean, like everything. Obviously, if we think about nature, which, I feel like we as humans often forget that really everything is so connected. So I could probably draw connections between anything.
Right.
Um,
And
but yeah,
in hindsight, it's also easier to draw those connections, right? But
absolutely.
while you were in the middle of it, like,
Oh, I had no idea.
oh, okay, got it, got it.
Well, I mean, again, I was following what felt right to me and I trusted
Yeah,
in that
yeah.
process. And I think when I say that, I mean, when I saw, like, when I came across something and it like gave me, fuzzy feelings, like I got excited
Mm-hmm.
and I felt passionate about whatever that might be. I let myself follow that. And I was, fortunate enough to be able to do that. Yeah. So again, I think it all kind of makes sense for myself, for who I am, kind of always I mean, I would call myself a big generalist. So I think that too is a lens to apply, where I really thrive in knowing a lot about, or knowing a little bit or enough about a lot of things and really being able to figure out how those things connect and make sense of them.
Got it, got it. And what about human-centered design? Like, when did you first come across this phrase, and when did you, and what attracted you to it?
Yeah, good question. Um, so I would say a soft introduction was when I was working with someone who's still a close friend and mentor of mine, Deborah Aldine. During my time at Pratt, she was the managing director at the Brooklyn Fashion Design Accelerator, which wasn't unfortunately no longer exists, but it was closely connected with Pratt at the time. And she was really at the center of building this thing. And then I, just by chance, kind of was introduced to her to help her. Um, and that was like through a graduate assistantship. So I, just small amounts of hours, but we clicked right away. And she really introduced me to the social impact space, because I really, again, it's interesting because unless you, I mean, people talk about like unless you have the language to talk about a thing, whether you know I mean, I think about color, like there's so many, many different languages, there's many different words for different colors. And like in certain languages, you don't have that language, you don't have the word. So it doesn't exist in a way, right? Because you don't have a way to describe it. I mean, of course it exists, but in your worldview. So similar, I think social impact, that whole design space just didn't really exist in my understanding of the world. Deborah Aldine introduced me to that. She actually introduced me, told me about Catapult Design. And that was when I was looking for jobs after, or just as I was finishing grad school, that was the only place I wanted to work at. And to the point of earlier, when I see a thing and that's the thing I want, like I go for that. I mean, I guess maybe been lucky, or maybe I'm just, intense enough where I just drive for that. And yeah, it worked out. I joined Catapult Design, moved out from New York to Denver for that. And that's really how I learned about human centered design. Yeah, and I learned by doing. I mean, by the time we had met, I had already, had some practice in it. But still, I was still, you always learn, of course, also in different contexts.
Got it.
Um,
And
yeah.
was there something about human-centered design, how you practiced it, something that surprised you? Like,
I think a big thing I learned, and actually, oh, go ahead.
No, no,
Uh,
something that surprised you, something which with your previous year experience, like s s still you had not anticipated, like.
yeah, I mean, I think there's so much, right? I mean, this is all very human, and anything in that space is, of course, you know, you're always surprised, and you're always learning, which is the beauty of it. Um, yeah, I think, I mean, big learning curve was definitely, I think it's relatively easy to be like, okay, here's the theory, you can study it. And I think that's, of course, important. But I've come across quite a few people where they say, I took a 1 week or 2 week IDEO class on, HCD. And like that is fantastic again, as like a foundational piece, because I do think it is important to just kind of understand what is the theory and those tools. But then if you don't apply it in your actual work, then I to me that is really the experience. That is really where you gain expertise. And I can now come into really any place, and not that I'm showing up as like a, hey, I have all the answers, but I have practiced all the tools, all the ways of doing it, that I'm able to really like sit and listen deeply and understand like when might approach or method or whatever it might be, when might that actually make sense? I think a big thing that actually I still remember you say, and I don't know if you remember this, but again, when we worked together, I thought it was really powerful when you told us, the team from Catapult Design, that you really appreciated our approach, because we didn't just show up with like, here's the thing we're doing, and like, we're going to go through this A, B, C, and this is the way to do it. But instead, we said we have some tools, we have some methods, like we do have some structure we want to kind of go through, but also like, you tell us like where are you all at with, also your design maturity, things you've done, all the challenges you're facing, maybe not all of them, but what is kind of the context.
Yeah, I remember
So I
that.
think that was
Yeah.
a big part. I think just like learning to listen and observe and like understand the context and the language also, that people are using, to then understand how this human-centered design, just as one other tool, right, and one other approach to complement the work that's already happening, yeah, how that can kind of come together. I think that was a big learning for me, and that I developed over time for sure.
Got it. And how did you develop it? Because, even now, for example, I look at professionals and I mean, I'm sure you're also aware of it. There's so many professionals out there who don't listen. And it's not as, I mean, it's easy to say listen, but actually doing it in practice is something very different, right? So how did you develop that skill as itself?
Yeah. I mean, I think like also thinking, about the people that I've worked with, including especially my team right now at Civic Design Collaborative, the lab at OPM, which where I mean, are these people are an incredible group of people, and I think and at Catapult as well, what they really had at the core, all of them, was humility, right? And like humility in the sense of, and sometimes to not to a fault, but like, where it's like, no, you go. Like, really not wanting to bring one's ego to the forefront too much. But yeah, I think just the like insight, and I don't know how much you can practice this. I do think, I mean, this is what we teach, kind of that, trying to bring that mindset shift to people in terms of like thinking about people and thinking about like how can your, the work that you do, how can you really think about that in a, slightly different way. And sometimes it's actually a huge shift that happens when people say, oh, like all of these things that like I'm doing in combination with others are actually like in support of this person. So like once you think about that person experience with, the different parts of the service, then people, I've seen this time and time again, people kind of have this aha moment of like, I still like know how my work is important. I need to focus on these things, but now I can also zoom out and understand, how it connects to all these different parts and how that shapes the experience of people, in interacting with the service if it's not as connected. Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit, but just to say, yeah, I think that humility, I mean, parts of that can certainly be taught. Um, but I do also think that the people that are attracted, I guess, to the space of social impact design to do to do this work, and it can be really hard work. I mean, you know, um, yeah, I feel like generally those people, are driven by something beyond their ego. Like they want to have an impact, make an impact, make the world a better place, whatever it might be, like kind of centered around mission. Um, so yeah, I think, but it also I think through having good mentors, and that's probably the number one in terms of kind of how can you develop that. I think just like having good people around you, whether they're your mentors, your colleagues who can kind of like, you can observe how they do things because I've learned so much. I mean, pretty much everything I learned was by like watching people who did that very well, who were able to listen very deeply, do design research, which I mean is incredibly difficult to do well and very respectfully, with people. Yeah, I think watching them do it, having those perhaps mindset shifts, and yeah, kind of, I think going back to your intentions, like what are you trying to do in the world? And, it's, I would say not all people would probably do this kind of work. And, that's okay. But yeah.
Yeah. And and you know, after you guys had come to Lucknow and we had those workshops and things, one of the realizations that I had, and because that was the first time I'd been even exposed to uh, these methods. I mean, I had read a little bit about it,
Oh, okay.
naturally been to the IDEO website,
Yeah.
but actually practicing it is very different than just reading about it, right? And one of the realizations that I had was that this, even this process and the kinds of methods and frameworks and ways of thinking that are involved in human centered design, it's like a life skill. And I was like,
Mhm.
these things should be taught in school. And
Yeah.
kids could benefit so much more from picking up a lot of these skills for their later life. And I had one mind. I was I was thinking, let me just start something and start teaching in school. But then I was like, no, take time. First,
Maybe sometime down the road.
don't make the mistake of, just doing something for 2 weeks and thinking you can go and teach it.
I see what you say.
Yeah, but yeah, that was my thought. I was like, these are skills, these are life skills, and a lot of it can benefit people.
Yeah, and I feel like, I mean, a lot of it is intuitive in a way, right? I mean, I'm still like surprised that, I mean, surprised, but then also not because I see why it's important to be talking about human-centered design because like it should be intuitive, right? But there are, I think what makes it so powerful is that, as for example, and this is not a one-to-one, but reflection prompts, right? Or like meditation or just like those things where it's just like you center yourself again, to really acknowledge, okay, yes, business objectives, policy, saying policy because I I was in federal government and still working in the public sector. Um, making money if you're in the private sector, especially, but those are all important. But, really at the core, like thinking about the people is something that if you just like go, go, go every day, you just kind of like it often just kind of gets forgotten about because there's so many competing objectives and things. So yeah, I think it is like a way to kind of like center yourself to like, switch your mindset a little bit or open your perspective a little bit to all these different ways of doing. Yeah, and I think, I mean, one other thing, big learning for me was also honestly, going like traveling as far as India to do some of this work. And realizing, I mean, some of this I already like I had issues with international development. It's still like a very colonial approach, right? And like that's why I stepped away from international development, and then I found my place in like this intersection where I was like, oh, but it's design, and like this way I'm not like coming in and being like, you need to do this. Not that that's what international development is completely about, but that was my perspective, especially as a very white, Western woman. Um, but yeah, in that space too, through my work, I've realized, and I should have probably known this before, but like I realized like there is that fine balance of like learning from each other, right? Like I think there's still value in, us having come to India and like sharing some of these practices and working together. But also like acknowledging, okay, what is the expertise that already exists in India, for example? And I mean, design community throughout, I mean, India is huge, but throughout India, like based on my experience, is very mature and it's very robust. So yeah, more and more while working at Catapult Design too, we really shifted to really acknowledging like what is the design expertise in the country, and then having more of a international exchange between like different countries and like ensuring we were all on the same page, but also like I don't think I should be going into a small rural town in India and conducting research on sexual reproductive health. Like I did that, and it was a very interesting experience. I hope not too much harm was done by me being there. Of course, we always had, local researchers to support the work, translate, but then also translate in language, but then also context and culture. But yeah, I think again, not to go too deep into that right now, but I obviously there's I think a lot of ethics, and people talk about this in design, and there should talk about that more. And to your point of like things that everyone should know and really practice in school, like there should really be deep like ethics, yeah, teaching of ethics in design school, especially when, I mean, in all ways, right? Because really at all levels you would be interacting with humans or like thinking about humans in one way or another. um yeah, so that was my other thing of maturing through the practice, by experience. But yeah, I wish I would have been aware of some of these things earlier on.
Yeah, but that's part of growing up. We all wish
Yeah,
we would have been
yeah,
aware of many things. Um,
totally.
and what was your most challenging um, moment as a designer in the social impact space at the time that you worked in that sector?
Whew. Um, yeah, I mean, not easy work, right? I got sick every time. I have a very sensitive stomach. Every time I came to India, probably could have been more careful. But So yeah, I think there's just the realities of, and again, I mean, I can only imagine like in the work that you did, long days where you're interacting with lots of people, potentially difficult situations. Yeah, so I think that part was very very intense, very interesting, very taught me a lot. I grew so much, but yeah, not easy. Yeah, and then I think just yeah, there were, and I don't want to talk about too many specifics, but I think there were definitely situations where I did not feel equipped enough to like lead on certain parts, and I was kind of in that position and I just had to figure it out. And it wasn't easy, but again, I feel like I really grew through that. And I made it through. I didn't lose myself. Um, and yeah, I take those lessons with me. I think one big thing I learned in that is also just to let people help you, or let
Right.
people help me. Because I realized too, I think the other thing that very much happens is when you're under stress and you're feeling overwhelmed, you tend to hold things very close to you. So,
Mm-hmm.
so you have like perhaps some sense of control, like you have your little thing. Um, yeah, and I realized like, it's hard to do in that situation where you're just like trying to survive. I mean, not literally survive, but in your mind, you're trying to survive. But it's especially important in those situations to say, hey, I need help. I am overwhelmed. I need help. Please help me. um, yeah, and that's where, yeah, I feel, especially again at the lab at OPM and now with my Civic team, like just incredible people that I work with where I can be very vulnerable and be myself, all the weird ways, and know that they're there to support. And I think that to me is really at the core of everything that has felt right for me and I want to do going forward. It's just my number one principle is work with good people, don't work with jerks, kind of two in one. Um, yeah, and I think that's been my biggest lesson for myself, to just like continue that forward, as much as possible.
Right. And Nadine, you've not just been a designer, right? You over the years you have picked up a lot of operational skills and how an organization runs, to fundraising, and a lot of these other aspects. So how did you start getting involved in the operational side of things, or did that come first and design came later?
Yeah, I would say I've always had those, like, a creative side to me, and then like I want things to work. Like whether it's like I need to organize all the pencils by, whatever. I was just doing a watercolor class, all the brushes by size or whatever, just like so it's easy for you to like figure out where those are, right? So I've always, I think, had that where like I really like organizing things, again, information, whatever it might be, to then move towards action, right? If you want to find your paintbrush, or you want to actually start a project. So yeah, Catapult, it really, like, for me was the place where I really matured in so many different ways because I got to do pretty much everything. I mean, I was doing the operational, internal things, the writing of proposals, from Gates Foundation to the National Endowment of the Arts, just longer, but yeah, and kind of everything in between. And that's actually now at Civic, a lot of what I do is like take, that information, raw information of ideas, conversations we have, with people, to then like think about, okay, what could this work look like? What could the scope look like? So yeah, I do a lot of that, internal to organizations, but then also in working with people. So I would say designer is kind of can mean many different things. While I could do the basics of like a wireframe and some like visual things, I am not a visual designer, not graphic designer, any of those things. That's where I would definitely bring in a specialist. But I'm more of the strategic designer. Again, designer can mean a lot of different things. Um, like programmatic strategist, I would say, to really like figure out again, like here's information or what is the information that's missing. So I've done a lot of design research and gone deep on that. How do we, gather that information in a respectful, evidence-based way, and then yeah, again, move to action. So yeah, yeah, that's where all those things kind of come together.
And it's quite remarkable to also like for me as well, like at Community Empowerment Lab CL, like where you had come, I also got to explore just so many different facets of the work, and it
Yeah,
helped build
nice.
a lot, just like Catapult, the role that Catapult played for you. And it's also quite lucky, right, to come across such an organization early in your career, and then
Oh,
they have
totally.
such a big impact on you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I feel very lucky. It definitely, yeah, built a foundation for me. Um, yeah.
And then you've also gone on and worked very closely in the public sector with the government, right? How is that? Like, did you go into that engagement with a certain set of expectations, like, or were you just like, oh, let me see what happens here?
Both. I feel like it's always a little bit of both, right? And again, I had this drive to just be, I think, a little closer, like to be more quote unquote in-house, perhaps, to be closer to like a specific domain um, of impact. I don't know. It feels a little fuzzy thinking about maybe in 10 years it will make sense. But I was thinking about healthcare and I was thinking about government as kind of two things. So I kind of explored both. And ultimately, it really was about, again, the team when I met the team at the lab at OPM. So we were positioned within the Office of Personal Management, almost like the HR human capital agency of the federal government in the US. And I had met two of them. Actually, Sean Baker is one of my current colleagues. Years before, well, I was at Catapult because they had come to Denver to do a training with some people. I think actually from OPM, from the Office of Personal Management, and they had invited people from Denver to share about their examples of work that had this human-centered design component. So I met them then, and I thought, oh, this is interesting. But then kind of put that aside. And then years later, I guess, yeah, 5 years ago ish, 4 or 5 years ago, 4 years ago, um, they were hiring for, I think it was actually for a research position. I was like, ah, I can, I can be many different things. So I was like, okay, I can position myself as a researcher because, yeah, I'm also a researcher. But yeah, as soon as I met also the more extended team, where interviews felt like really interesting conversation rather, than like being put on the spot. That's when I knew that I wanted to join. My expectation again was like I would be more in-house and have more direct impact, which not it's not necessarily not true, but I realized that while the lab at OPM was positioned within the Office of Personal Management and we worked within our agency, it was almost like a design consultancy across the federal government. So it was actually pretty similar to the Catapult in a way, where we worked with different agencies. Like I worked with the National Park Service, thinking about, kind of small part of a data system, which included a lot of research, actually going to parks and talking to park rangers, and those kind of things, and then kind of coming up with a strategy and working closely with the national park team. So that's just one example. And yeah, so I think we got to experience a lot of different parts of the federal government. Of course, people that came to us um, were already kind of ready. They already had this like at least a like inkling of an idea of like we want something of this human-centered design thing. So that was also very much core to what the lab at OPM did, was really building capacity of these teams within the federal government of doing things in a more human-centered way. Yeah, and that, I mean, the example I mentioned, doing interviews with park rangers, things like that, we did do. But because of kind of the level of where the federal government sits, we didn't really like talk to many constituents. There were, a project here, there, where we did actually talk to the public about, specific topic. But yeah, generally it was like, how can we help people that like are kind of like the engine behind all those things? How can we help them work in a more human-centered way, which was very exciting. But that was definitely a realization I had as I was I had joined and I was working within that.
Got it, got it. And what differences did you find in working with the government versus earlier with the people working in the social impact space?
Yeah, good question. I mean, they're all good questions. Yeah, I mean, there's the reality of being within a very large, very robust, but also very like established entity. I mean, federal government, especially in the US, is huge. And there are practices that are in place, things that are in place that can be very difficult to shift. It takes a lot of time to shift. So it's kind of like, metaphor of a giant ship. Like anytime you want to like change course, it takes a long time to really move, versus a speedboat. Um, yeah, I think that was one part where sometimes it felt like we were making only incremental changes, if at all, like in terms of how it felt. But again, like you're at such a scale, so like any small change you make could potentially like you're informing potentially even policy, indirectly at least, but definitely like how some of these programs are run, what those things actually like look like as they kind of inform things at a more local level. um yeah, and I mean it is interesting now being kind of on the other side again. Now with Civic, we are actually in the process of establishing our legal status. We were thinking about what kind of organization do we want to be, but we get to shape all of that. And I have to say, while I really appreciate the experience of working within the federal government, and I think there were also a lot of pluses there. Like it really felt like we didn't have to do business development. We didn't, I mean, we were fee for service, which was also interesting. So we actually like people paid us for our services and they had to legally. But we didn't have to, we didn't have to sell people in the sense of like, you know, um, yeah, I guess it felt more like a partnership, like partnership development, like, and that's what we called it, like the scoping process and all of that. It was a partnership. Like we could talk to people like they're our peers and colleagues, and even though they were they were paying us, it really felt like we were in this together because we all believed in making public services better. So I really appreciate that, and I feel like that was maybe a little different than my experience before joining the federal government. But now that I'm again part of Civic, we hold a lot of those relationships. so closely. Like we really are a relationship-based organization, especially through our managing director, Ariane Miller. She's incredible, of course. But we, yes, we are trying to promote our services and all of that. But in our conversations with potential clients, it really feels like, we're in this together and like we're here to support the work, the important work they're doing. Um, yeah, and of course we need to make money, but it feels like that comes through that mutual respect and understanding that like we want to do this together and so yeah, I feel like I went certain direction for a little bit, but yeah.
No, no, it's okay. And and you've like the years of interaction that you've had, if we just talk in terms of uh, human-centered design, how, how did you see the receptivity to human-centered design among people in the social impact space versus people in the government?
Hmm. Um, well, I think first of all, I've been mostly in the space where I didn't necessarily have to sell human-centered design or like, as a concept, it's like people
No, just from your
generally,
interactions, what did
yeah.
you assess?
Yeah, and I'm saying this because I think like people that I've worked with were generally pretty open to like what
Okay.
is this thing? Um, but I mean, there were certainly situations where someone was voluntold in the sense of, a supervisor might have told someone, oh, you should go to this training on human-centered design. And they didn't actually, one, they
Mm.
might have not even known what it was. They didn't really want to be there. But I think, I mean, I don't necessarily see a difference, I guess, between my experience in the federal government and kind of more
Mm-hmm.
social impact
Mm-hmm.
space. Because I think again, like what Catapult, I think did pretty well, what the lab did really well was taking this, concept and really bringing it to the different contexts to make it relevant. So we didn't just show up to say like this is a thing, like stuff it down people's throat, but instead we shared, especially think about the lab at OPM, we shared a lot of our project examples to say like,
Yeah.
hey, this is work we did and this is how we applied it. And then have conversations, invite people to bring their own challenges so that it's actually like it's all about applied learning rather than like here is the thing.
Okay.
But we learned that kind of starting with human-centered design as a framing was helpful for people. And we talked about this a lot within the lab because like we did a lot of different things. You could totally put that under the umbrella of human-centered design, but it's just packaging it that way, at least as the introductory, like what do we do?
Mm-hmm.
It was really helpful to like simplify it in the sense of it's human-centered design, right? But again, I think that was also true at Catapult, where it's like there's so many other things at play, but it is, I think humans in general appreciate like simplify a simplified kind of like introduction to what the thing is, and then you can kind of go from there.
Got
I
it.
don't know if I answered your question, but
No, no,
that was my experience.
I understand what you're saying. And Nadine, now that you're, you know, trying to set up this collective, like what inspired you to start doing this?
Um, well, I was very lucky that Ariane asked me to be part of this. So she really is the driver behind it. And yeah, I mean, that was a no-brainer for me to continue to work with the incredible people. So Ariane Miller, um, Patty Byrne, Sean Baker, and Sarah Romanowski. They're just incredible people. And then, of course, there's the extended lab at OPM team that, as we actually grow and are able to bring in the work, we also want to bring, where possible, bring some of those colleagues back in as well. But yeah, I mean, that's it. It's the people, number one for sure. It's just every day, it's just such a pleasure to work with them. And then, yeah, I think the work itself. I mean, even though we're civic design, mostly public sector, but yeah, as we're kind of exploring what this is, I think we don't want to go too broad, but there's also lots of possibilities as to where it can take us. And yeah, I, wherever I go, I know I will always be in the social impact public sector space because to me, that's just kind of core to my why and yeah, what feels important to me.
Understood, understood. And how do you see developments in AI and their impact on your work?
Yeah. We might be working on a project um to it's most it is it's around like the impact of AI on public services. So it really is understanding how people in government are applying AI in different ways and like, what are some stories of success or, pivoting that we can capture. So it's mostly a big research project. But yeah, it's absolutely coming up in our work. I mean, it's in our day to day, of course, we're considering like what feels appropriate, if at all, to use different tools in our work. But then also, yeah, as we are, working in public services, like that's just the reality. People are using tools already. They will be using them even more so,
Hmm.
probably going forward and in different ways. So yeah, I think we're especially interested in that component, kind of the work
Right.
that hopefully we'll be doing soon, really understanding, as with all things that we do, the human side of things, right? Like there are lots of people already looking at the tool and the models themselves, and like, are there ethical risks or what are the risks? Because of
Hmm.
course there's lots of risks. And then how can you mitigate those? But then we're again much more interested in like how are people using it in their day to day in their workflow, right? Yeah, how are people feeling about it, and what are their experiences that can then be shared with others?
Yeah.
We're
Because nowadays
exploring that.
the news is filled with stories of how the humans will get be removed from the equation and a lot of stories around that. The news cycle just runs on it again and again. And what are your thoughts? Like, is the role of designers going to end?
No, I mean, there's of course certain things that are being animated, and I mean, yeah, for sure. Like especially more junior roles in design, like graphic design or visual design. I have a friend, who shared some experiences that she is having directly with like, the difficulty for more junior designers for sure. I'm not as close to that.
Mhm.
In my space, though, I actually think that this human-centered component, people are already talking about it, but is going to be more and more important, right? It is like in terms of the input of the data, like how is that information gathered and put in? Actually having like there's the like having real humans actually like assess that data and like kind of see what AI is like spitting out or what's actually doing with that. It's ensuring that like the data, I mean, this is even before the data that is put in, the input is like, based on like a diversity of demographics. All of those things that are very critical to human-centered design research, really, ensuring that there's as little inequities in in these systems as possible, because I mean we're mirroring them off of ourselves, and like whoever has, you know, the
Yeah.
power to build the thing, of course, has the power to decide what goes in. But yeah, then also, like I just mentioned, you know, really thinking about the human impact of things. I think this kind of lens of human-centered design is even more critical. And yeah, not that like I'm like, oh yeah, we're gonna have more jobs because of, or more work because of it. But I do think that yeah, there's obviously danger, well, not danger, but you know, things will change, or changing already, and certain roles or you know ways of working will definitely be impacted more than others. But I do think that again, that like the strategic creative lens, I mean, we're already seeing that, like even you know in LinkedIn posts when someone write like just uses AI to the extent where it's like there's not even like a human tone in that. And like, of course, that's a slightly different example, but I do think it gets at that piece of like, yeah, like acknowledging that AI can be really good for certain things. But and I'm no expert, of course, on these things, um, but yeah, there's safeguards that still require humans, and then there's the just like I don't know. Maybe I'm too optimistic, but like I feel like humans still want to interact with humans, you know? And again, like I think there's great value in having AI support, you know, also public services and, you know, ChatGPT or like a little chatbot or whatever it might be. Um, but then also ensuring that like where it is critical and important to have the human interaction and to have the human input that it is there. And I do think that is happening and that will happen because there's enough, you know, thoughtful people out there that are thinking about these things.
Got it. Nadine, if you had to go back to college and give a guest lecture on,
Mhm.
and inspire students,
Ooh.
what would you talk about? Like, what would that guest lecture be on?
Well, it depends who the students are. Of course, I'm like now, like, what's the context and like, what are they studying? What might they be interested in? What might feel relevant? But yeah, I
Is
think the things
there
I'm,
is there something that you think that, oh, I really think, I want to tell today's generation about X or Y?
I don't know if that's like a generational piece that I would necessarily have because I feel like I would be worried about coming across as the like, you know, oh, here's the millennial, like, you
Okay.
know, tell.
Got it. Got
No,
it.
but I think the
Let me
piece of
simplify
no,
the question.
yeah, I think I
Um,
understand what you mean.
say you had to go back and give a lecture on the unsaid truths of human-centered design. What would that contain?
Yeah, and I can also speak to your earlier piece, and I think it is I think just the human side of things, right? And that like it is important to just pause and listen and just create that space to be together. Yeah, I don't know, something around like finding your people, so that you can find your weird or be in your weird, right? And I say weird as like, you know, just be yourself, in all the different ways. And yeah, follow what you're passionate about. And I feel like through that you will find, you know, the things where you can really make an impact, you know, without like trying to fit yourself into certain things that just don't really make sense. Um, but yeah, I think with the human-centered piece, um, yeah, I think just applying and I mean, I show up as a generalist. So for me, it is about, you know, just paying attention to your surroundings, seeing the opportunities, but then, you know, always checking with people, who are the experts or have those lived experiences and those different things. Um, yeah, but then, also not to dismiss your ideas, but just to kind of like check them, check yourself with other people. And again, I think that that's where it's important to surround yourself with good people that you work with, um, or create that space. Yeah, I don't know. There's many different things. Yeah, I think maybe at the core of it is just like, and this is something that I want to do more of too. Pausing from time to time, and maybe that's like in the morning for 10 minutes or 5 minutes, just to like close your eyes and just inhale, exhale. Or it's a little journaling, whatever it might be. But I feel like I tend to also just like go go go, and I think that's, I mean, maybe tied back to the human-centered design piece. Like again, it is something that should perhaps be so intuitive, but we just like in our everyday as we run, with all the things we're doing, we just kind of lose sight of that, of kind of ourselves and what's important. Um, yeah, so I want to do more of that. And I feel like when I do it, it's incredible. It's very powerful. Um, yeah, I don't know if that will really be
No,
that helpful
that's
to people, but yeah.
I think it'll be helpful. And in fact, we need more people talking about that. My last question to you, Nadine, is what makes you happy these days?
Oh, I love that. Um, yeah, I think the good transition from what I just said. Um, I mean, I worked like when our program was shut down, the lab at OPM under the current administration. It was pretty traumatic. Um, there was a lot of just like language that was being used that was very hurtful, and yeah, it's pretty hard. I hadn't experienced anything like that before, and yeah, I was lucky. Like a colleague had mentioned someone who's a coach, and I worked with them for a little bit, and they were amazing, Frankie. Um, and yeah, they helped me, I think, pause and like have like reframe things, even like journaling into a way where it made sense to me and gave me a strong why. Because before that, I always felt like all of these things are shoulds. Like everyone journals, right? I should journal, and I just like couldn't do it because I realized I didn't have the why behind it. That's very critical for me to do anything. Like I'm driven by my passion and whys, right? And has to make sense. So yeah, I think what makes me happy is having stepped more into what feels right to me. And reframing some of these things. So like journaling for the purpose of just centering myself and just like, having swirl in my head, maybe be a little calmer. um, yeah, I'm actually in a little bit, I'm going to go to my ceramics class. So getting back into making and having that flexibility. And yes, I feel very, fortunate to be able to have that, to, take some of that time. And like my colleagues, we're very supportive of each other, like also having like personal time to those kind of things. Yeah, so I think just even though there's a lot happening in the world, a lot of heavy things, I think I'm very happy right now with doing some of those small things that, yeah, that give me joy in the moment, and let me be creative again. So
That's a great
yeah,
thought.
thanks for that question. That's a nice
That's a great
question.
thought to end our interview. I really enjoyed our conversation, Nadine, and thank you so much for
Yeah.
joining.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me just share.